Have you ever wondered why some people lose power the moment they open their mouth, while others say almost nothing and command the entire room? In a world addicted to noise, where everyone is shouting to be seen, the rarest strength is restraint. Machiavelli understood this long before the age of microphones and opinions. He saw that those who speak without measure trade away their clarity for comfort, their mystery for attention. The Stoics taught the same: speak only when your words carry weight, and let silence carry the rest. This is not about staying quiet to avoid conflict. It is about choosing stillness as a deliberate act. Silence, when used with intention, unsettles. It makes people pause. It makes them reflect. And in that pause, you hold the advantage, not by forcing it, but by mastering it. This video is about that mastery, the art of knowing when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover may change the way you use your voice forever. 1. The power of absence. There is a rare form of strength that speaks louder than any voice. It is the power of deliberate silence. When you stop speaking, the world around you begins to fill in the gaps. Questions arise. Doubt creeps in. People begin to wonder, did I cross a line? Why hasn't he responded? What is he thinking? In that space of unspoken stillness, your absence becomes a mirror, and as they gaze into that silence, they do not see you. They see themselves, their guilt, their uncertainty, their hidden intentions. Machiavelli understood what the Stoics mastered before him. Real power is not in reacting, but in mastering the urge to speak before the truth has surfaced. To remain quiet when insulted is not weakness. It is a test. You allow the other to continue revealing what they hide with words. You give them room to show their true nature. The insecure will crave a response. The disloyal will reveal their need for your presence. The manipulative will fumble without your validation, and while they believe they are winning, they are actually unraveling. This is the art of selective silence. You do not remain quiet to appear strong. You stay silent because you already are. When someone disrespects you, it is tempting to speak, to confront, to clarify, but that impulse often protects them from facing themselves. It gives them a new argument to hold on to, a distraction from what they've done. But when you say nothing, when you offer no defense and no reaction, you hand them the weight of their own actions and ask them to carry it. That is far heavier than any words you could throw. Consider this: someone lies about you, and you correct them instantly. They now have a new excuse, a new fight. But stay silent and watch. Their lie begins to eat at them. Their story starts to collapse under the pressure of reality. Your absence forces reflection, and eventually, regret. As Marcus Aurelius said, the best revenge is to be unlike him who did the injury. You don't need to raise your voice. You need to raise your standard. Let your restraint confuse them. Let your stillness expose them, because the loudest truth is often the one left unspoken. And when you finally walk away, let the silence echo longer than any farewell ever could. 2. When silence speaks louder. Not every silence is powerful, and not every word is weak. The Stoic way is not to remain quiet at all costs, nor to speak for the sake of pride. It is to discern, with unwavering clarity, when speech serves your integrity and when silence secures your power. Machiavelli, like the Stoics before him, understood that speech is a tool and silence is a weapon, but only if used with mastery. You must know precisely when to refrain, when to hold your voice like a blade, unsheathed but still, letting others cut themselves on their own recklessness. This is not passivity. This is control. When you're attacked publicly, mocked, called out, drawn into a confrontation, the world around you turns their gaze not to the aggressor, but to you. They wait for your retaliation. But when you offer none, when you remain composed and unreadable, you shift the energy of the room. You remove yourself from their battlefield and let them fight their own echo. And in that silence, something unexpected happens. The crowd begins to turn. They question the one who keeps talking. They feel the imbalance. And your stillness becomes authority. You have already won because you refuse to let their noise rewrite your character. Now imagine someone trying to distort your reality, twisting your words, painting falsehoods as truth. This is where most people panic. They start explaining, justifying, pleading for understanding. But the Stoic knows, once you argue within a false frame, you've already lost your footing. You have entered the other's game, and that is not where power lives. Machiavelli would not clarify. He would detach. No argument, no reaction, only silence that resists all manipulation. Because manipulation only thrives where response exists. Once you stop engaging, once your presence no longer feeds their narrative, they collapse. They are not confused by your silence. They are exposed by it. After you have been disrespected and they know it, most will tell you to speak your truth, confront the pain, demand answers. But the truth is, the moment you speak first, you're seeking resolution, you're signaling need, and that is not strength. Machiavelli understood the weight of withdrawal. He would vanish not to punish, but to prove, to show that your presence, your clarity, your voice are earned, not owed. Your silence is not absence, it is consequence. It rewrites the dynamic without saying a word. Now they feel the shift. They are no longer in control of how the story moves forward. You are. Then comes the test most fail. When someone grows distant, delays response, withholds warmth, they do not do it by accident. They want you to chase. They want to know if your worth depends on their approval. Most respond. They ask. They explain. They beg. But not you. You are not there to perform. You disappear. Entirely. No request for attention. No desire for closure. Because true strength is not declared. It is witnessed. And when your absence makes them doubt their own, you've already spoken louder than any justification ever could. Picture yourself at the table. The noise swells. People compete to be heard. They fight to dominate with arguments and appearances. But you remain still, observing, calculated. You speak once, if at all. And when you do, your voice lands not as opinion, but as finality. This is not arrogance. This is discipline. And in a world addicted to validation, the man who does not seek it becomes the most feared. They wonder, why is he so calm? What does he know that we do not? What decision has he already made that he does not need to explain? Machiavelli and the Stoics agreed on this silent rule, that in certain moments, speaking is not strength, it is surrender. That those who rush to be understood often reveal how much they fear being unseen. You must know the exact point where words lose their edge. And when you do, you will find something extraordinary. The less you speak, the more your presence speaks for you. And those who once tried to provoke you with noise will now fall silent in your stillness. Because silence, when chosen wisely, does not retreat. It reigns. 3. The 4 forms of silence. To the ordinary mind, silence is absence. To the Stoic and the strategist, silence is form. It is not the lack of words, but the presence of discipline. Machiavelli, much like the ancient Stoics, never viewed silence as a retreat. He saw it as a tool, sharpened through restraint and wielded through intention. Silence, when mastered, does not hide. It reveals. It does not surrender. It shapes the battlefield. And each form of silence carries a different lesson, a different outcome, and a different kind of control. The first is the silence of mystery. This is the art of becoming unreadable. You withhold not because you are hiding, but because you understand the danger of being too known. When people can predict you, they prepare for you, they categorize you, manage you, and mold their actions to manipulate yours. But when your mind remains still behind your eyes, when your motives remain beneath the surface, others become cautious. You do not declare your intentions, you do not explain your reasons, and in that restraint, you become an enigma, a person whose presence demands attention because no one is sure where you stand. A man like this controls not by assertion, but by uncertainty. His silence does not confuse, it commands. The second is the silence of judgment. This is not an absence of thought, it is the full weight of it. You do not need to call out the liar, the coward, the manipulator. You look at them and say nothing, not out of fear, but because the stillness itself becomes the verdict. They stumble, they correct themselves, they speak more than they intended, because when someone is met with silence instead of validation, they begin to unravel. This is the silence of a man who sees everything and says nothing. A man whose approval must be earned and whose disapproval is never spoken but always felt. The third is the silence of consequence. It is the most severe form. This is not composure in conversation. This is removal from the relationship. Someone violates your boundary, and instead of arguing, you vanish. You do not argue for your worth. You do not plead to be understood. You simply remove your presence. This silence teaches by absence what no explanation ever could, that your time, your energy, and your peace are not for negotiation. Those who have grown used to your warmth now feel your distance, and that absence becomes a lesson that echoes long after words would have faded. The fourth is the silence of composure. This is the Stoic's weapon in chaos. When others escalate, you remain grounded. When voices rise, yours stays still. When accusations fly, your gaze does not shift. Because power is not in the ability to speak, but in the strength to remain unmoved. The calm man in conflict is not detached. He is decisive. He is not slow to react. He is deliberate. And his silence is not passivity. It is precision. He decides the terms of the conversation, and when those terms are not met, he walks away untouched. This is not stubbornness, this is sovereignty. Each of these silences serves a purpose. Mystery to create presence without disclosure, judgment to reveal without confrontation, consequence to teach without punishment, composure to prevail without escalation, and when you begin to use them with awareness, people change before you speak. They become more measured. They watch their tone. They rethink their approach, not because you demanded it, but because you showed them that your silence is not emptiness. It is a force. The man who can speak well is respected, but the man who can stay silent at the right moment is remembered. Because true influence is not loud. It is precise. And when you master silence as a form of strength, you no longer need to raise your voice to be heard. You only need to be present. 4. Silence as a strategy of control. There is a quiet form of power few ever master, a form that does not announce itself, a form that does not retaliate, argue, or defend. It vanishes. It leaves a space so hollow and unyielding that others begin to crumble inside it. Machiavelli understood this better than most, not through theory, but through discipline. He knew that people rarely mourn what they lose. They mourn what they can no longer reach. When you walk away and explain yourself, they hold onto your words. But when you disappear in silence, they are left with nothing but the echo of what they cannot undo. This is the battlefield most never see. When someone leaves you, disrespects you, betrays you, the world teaches you to respond, to call them out, to ask why, to express pain. But that reaction becomes their victory. because now they believe they mattered more than your composure. They feel they walked first, that they had the final word. And they leave convinced of their importance. But when you remain silent, when you offer no response, no message, no narrative, the script reverses. The power begins to shift. They start questioning the entire story. Was I really that valuable? Why is there no resistance? Did I overplay my hand? Your silence begins to bend their memory. It confuses what was once certain. And confusion, more than rejection, causes the deepest cracks in human confidence. That is what Machiavelli knew. You never chase. You never clarify. You disappear entirely. And in doing so, you force them to sit alone with every unresolved doubt. They expected closure. They find absence. They expected drama. They find discipline. And now they must interpret your silence with no guide, no clues, no certainty. And that torment becomes yours to command without ever lifting a hand. Most fail here. Someone disrespects them, and they reach out. They send a message. They leave the door cracked open. They try to keep things amicable, but the Stoic path is different. It requires you to master the urge to be understood and replace it with the strength to be misinterpreted. When someone exits your life through betrayal, you do not follow. You let the door close behind them. Not to punish, but to protect. You offer no explanations, because explanations offer closure, and closure gives them comfort. You give them none. Silence, in its purest form, is not avoidance. It is clarity. It says, without saying, I am not available to be mistreated again. I do not reward disrespect with further access. And when they realize that nothing is coming, no text, no reply, no second chance, it becomes unbearable. Because now, your silence is not passive. It is active. It makes them reread old messages, revisit past conversations, speak of you in rooms you are no longer in. All because they lost access not to your presence, but to your mystery. They begin to wonder, was I a mistake? Did I misjudge his strength? Why is he not fighting for me? And the truth is simple. They never wanted love. They wanted power. They wanted to be missed, chased, needed. But when you go quiet, they lose all of it, because what they truly fear is not your anger, but your indifference. You must deny them the clarity they seek. Do not say, you hurt me, or I'm done. That gives them resolution. You give them none. Instead, let your stillness do the speaking. Let it fracture their self-perception. Let it haunt their confidence. Do not announce your exit. Make it felt. The moment you declare your departure, you hand over control. You give them a timestamp, an ending. But if you disappear without warning, without sound, you leave them trapped in a question. And questions, when left unanswered, become unbearable. They begin to refresh their messages, look at old photos, create conversations in their heads that never happened. They post things designed for your eyes. They speak of you loud enough for you to hear through someone else, because silence has done what your presence never could. It has exposed their fear, the fear that they were never as important as they thought. And the more time passes, the more that fear feels like truth. You become not a memory. You become a warning. They speak of you with regret, not because of what happened, but because of what they can no longer touch. And that is where silence becomes not just strength, but legacy. When your absence can no longer be recovered, when no door is left open, you become the standard they will never reach again. And every person they meet afterward is a failed attempt to reclaim what they lost without knowing when or how they lost it. To build this power, you must kill the need to correct perception. Most people talk because they are afraid of being misunderstood. They over-explain, over-justify, try to be seen in the right light. But Machiavelli didn't care about being liked. He cared about being underestimated. That's the real game. You must be willing to let others misunderstand you. Let them twist the story. Let them assume they won. Because when you remain silent, you don't defend your image. You preserve your position. And over time, your absence becomes heavier than their presence ever was. Do not correct lies. Do not defend against doubt. Do not respond to insults. Be still. Watch them struggle to understand you. And in that struggle, you become untouchable. You're not mysterious. You're disciplined. You do not vanish because you're weak. You vanish because you're in control. Your silence becomes the signal, the pause that makes people question everything. And this only works if you remove your voice from the reach of their habits. You do not repeat yourself. You do not restate your values. If someone crosses your boundary once, you do not remind them. You disappear. You never explain a standard twice. Because silence is the cost of ignorance. And people learn fast when it means losing access to you. In conversation, in conflict, in group dynamics, you withhold commentary. You don't insert your opinion just because others expect it. You let your absence speak louder than their volume. And this silence draws more attention than any speech could. People begin to watch your body language. They listen more closely to your quiet than they do to others shouting, and they adjust. Not because you asked, but because you've created a presence they can't afford to lose. You never rush to speak about your goals. You do not brag about your projects. You do not announce your progress. Let them find out late. Let your success hit like thunder from a sky they assumed was still. Because silence around your ambition protects its power. When people cannot access what you are building, they start to fear it. That fear turns to respect. Not the kind born of admiration, but the kind born of not knowing how to stop you. You build a reputation not through what you say, but through what you do not say, and over time, your silence becomes your identity. You become the man who does not repeat himself, who does not engage with the petty, who does not offer warnings. Your silence becomes your edge, your armor, your reputation, and the day may come when you enter a room, say nothing, and still shift every conversation around you. Not because of what you've done, but because of what you've refused to do. And that is the highest form of control, not through domination, but through disappearance, not through explanation, but through absence, not through power declared, but through power quietly, permanently embodied. That is the way of the Stoic. That is the way of Machiavelli. That is the true power of selective silence. 5. The Art of Disappearance. There is a kind of silence that does not echo. It lingers. It reshapes memory. It becomes legacy. Machiavelli understood one of the most piercing truths of power, that sometimes the most commanding move you can make is not confrontation, not explanation, but absence. To leave, not as retreat, not in anger, not for drama, but in full control. You walk away at your height while your value is still undeniable, and in doing so, you do not become a chapter in someone's story. You become the part they never finished reading. You become myth, not memory. Most people stay too long. They overstay their relevance. They remain available until they are no longer seen. They explain too often, justify too long, beg to be understood by those who have already stopped listening. They think they are holding the relationship together, but they are only dissolving their own weight. Every extra moment spent trying to be heard becomes a moment where their presence is taken for granted. But the Stoic understands that strength lies not in being available, but in being missed. You must leave before they are ready. And when you do, leave with such calm, such quiet clarity, that it unsettles the very foundation they thought they stood on. Machiavelli would say, "Withdraw when you are strongest. Let them chase a ghost they can no longer grasp. Because when you disappear on your own terms, They are left not just with your absence, but with their own silence. And it is in that silence that reflection begins. They remember every word left unsaid, every boundary they ignored, every gesture they dismissed. Your absence becomes their mirror, and they must now face themselves within it. Do not leave in fury. That is not power. That is noise. Do not disappear to wound them. That is still weakness. Disappear because your focus has shifted. Your spirit has evolved. Your path has turned to a place they no longer belong in. Do not announce your transformation. Live it. And when they look around and find themselves left behind, let them realize you moved without asking them to notice. This is not escape. It is elevation. When you say nothing, they cannot accuse you of bitterness. They cannot paint you as broken, because everything about your silence declares, I did not lose you. I outgrew you. There is a sharpness in strategic absence. It leaves others leaning forward into a space that is now void. They reach for your reaction, your explanation, your voice, and all they find is the weight of their own misjudgment. The silence becomes their cliff, and what follows is not clarity, but freefall. That is not immaturity. That is timing. That is the Stoic art of withdrawal. It forces others to sit in the ruins of what they took for granted. Let them talk. Let them twist the story. Let them try to shape the narrative to their advantage. You offer no corrections. You hold no debates. Their need to explain your absence only confirms its impact. And when you refuse to engage, your indifference becomes a wall too high to scale. People fear being ignored, but what truly breaks them is being forgotten while they are still trying to be remembered. Machiavelli's weapon was never vengeance. It was absence that sharpened into memory. It was silence that made people unravel on their own. Searching for meanings you never gave them. You do not wait for apologies. You do not demand closure. You do not offer your presence as a prize for their confusion. You vanish like a breath withheld, and in the stillness. They start to feel you in every silence that follows, every unopened message, every unexpected name drop, every pause in conversation where your absence now roars louder than your voice ever did. You did not break them. You simply left and took the gravity of the room with you. When you speak rarely, you become respected. When you leave without warning, you are remembered. When you disappear without conclusion, you are studied. That is the legacy of quiet departure. You are no longer a man who shouts. You are not one who pleads or chases. You have become the presence that shifts energy, even in absence. You have mastered the disappearance that does not scream revenge, but radiates evolution. And from that silence, you rise untouchable. That is not cruelty. That is command. That is Stoic power in its purest form. If this spoke to you, subscribe and walk into your next decision with strength. The next video will meet you where your calm begins.